In this video, we'll be learning three topics. So first is atelectasis, second is bronchial asthma, and third is lung abscess. So basically the term atelectasis, ectasis means expansion or dilation, whereas atel means not properly. So atelectasis basically means not properly expanded. So definition wise, atelectasis is incomplete expansion of lungs or collapse of previously inflated lungs to produce areas of airless lung parenchyma. And in most of the cases, atelectasis is generally reversible. Coming to the types of atelectasis, the first type is called neonatal atelectasis and the second is called acquired atelectasis. So in definition part, we saw the first two statements, right? So incomplete expansion of lungs, that was the first part of the definition. So that is basically nothing but neonatal type of atelectasis. And the second statement which said collapse of previously inflated lungs, so that is called acquired atelectasis. Acquired atelectasis again is divided into three subtypes. So the first is resorption atelectasis, second is compression atelectasis, and the third one is contraction atelectasis. So coming to the first acquired subtype, which is resorption atelectasis. So here basically what happens is something is obstructing the airway. So whatever air is present distal to that obstruction is completely utilized or resorbed, and that is why the alveoli collapse. That portion of the lung collapses. So there's a flow chart here I have put for you. So excessive secretion, mucus plugs or exudates or foreign body or a fragment of a tumor. So once this blocks one particular site in the airway, distal to it what happens is air is completely resorbed, and because the air is completely resorbed from the alveoli, there is collapse of the portion of lung that is supplied by that particular airway. In resorption atelectasis, mediastinum shifts to the same side to which collapse has happened. So if left lung has collapsed because of resorption atelectasis, then mediastinum will shift to the left side itself. So here is a representative image of resorption atelectasis. So you can see something that is blocking the part of the airway there. So I've labeled it as FB as in foreign body, but it could be mucus plug or tumor itself. So since there is an obstruction distal to that obstruction, air is completely absorbed in the alveoli, and that is why the lung has shrunken. In compression atelectasis, there is something that is compressing on the lung, making it to collapse. So example for that is significant fluid. It could either be exudate or transudate or blood or air or tumor in the pleural cavity. So there is something in the pleural cavity that is pressing on the lung. Here, however, since there is a mass involved, so it could either be pleural effusion, something in the pleural cavity, or a tumor itself that is pressing on the lung, the mediastinum happens to shift to the opposite side. In resorption atelectasis, mediastinum had shifted to the same side of the collapse. So here it is opposite side of the collapse. So this is an image showing compression atelectasis. So here PE I have labeled, that is pleural effusion. So pleural effusion is pressing on the lung and making it to collapse. So the third subtype of acquired atelectasis is contraction atelectasis. So in contraction atelectasis, what happens is there is an area of fibrosis which is making, because of the contraction of which the lung is collapsing. So in the previous video, we had learnt about a condition, bronchiectasis, which has numerous fibrotic bands spreading onto the or involving the pleura. So that can be a cause for contraction atelectasis. So diagram of contraction atelectasis. So you can see some fibrotic bands are there at the periphery of the lung, and the lung has collapsed. The problem with atelectasis is if a significant portion of lung is involved by atelectasis, that is, a significant portion of lung does not expand properly anymore, then it means that oxygenation of RBCs won't happen properly. So whenever there is oxygenation not happening properly, patient will have symptoms of breathlessness, tachypnea, all these things. One more thing is secretions may collect in those places, and when secretions are collecting in those places, it may predispose to various infections. Coming to the second topic in this video, which was bronchial asthma. So bronchial asthma is defined as a chronic disorder of conducting airways caused by immunological reaction characterized by episodic bronchoconstriction, which is due to increased air sensitivity to stimuli, inflammation of the bronchial walls, and increased mucus secretion. Bronchial asthma is one of the most common lung disorders, and it approximately affects 300 million people worldwide. And majority of the patients of bronchial asthma are children, not adults. So adults, the percentage is slightly lesser. And it is said to be a disease of urbanization. Clinically, asthma is characterized by the presence of episodic wheezing, breathlessness, chest tightness, and cough. So most commonly this is early in the morning. One more entity that you have to know is acute severe asthma, previously known as status asthmaticus. So status asthmaticus means symptoms are not relieved by usual reliever inhaler. So salbutamol inhaling patients of asthma will be taking, right? So with that, if the symptoms are not resolving, then it is called acute severe asthma. And a sign of acute severe asthma is the patient is unable to complete his sentences. So here's a big list of risk factors and triggers involved in asthma. So risk factors and triggers, the difference is that risk factors are something that predispose to the development of asthma, whereas triggers are something that cause exacerbation of asthma or cause excessive symptoms in asthma. So there are endogenous risk factors and environmental factors. So common risk factors include, first is atopy, second is genetic predisposition. Then environmental factors include indoor and outdoor allergens. Then there is smoking. Triggers wise, important ones are allergens, viral infections, cold air, and certain drugs. Let's briefly discuss about the types of asthma. So there are 4 types of asthma. The first is atopic asthma, second is non-atopic asthma, third one drug-induced asthma, and fourth one occupational asthma. Coming to the first one, which is atopic asthma. So this is the most common type of bronchial asthma there is. And atopy, as you all know, is type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. So this atopic asthma usually begins in childhood, and there is usually a positive family history of asthma. One more thing is these patients who have atopic asthma are generally known to have allergic rhinitis, then atopic dermatitis. So these conditions may be there in association with asthma. Then these patients are generally allergic to dust, pollen, cockroach or animal dander, and certain food. Then to test for atopic asthma, you can either do a skin test wherein multiple patches which contain the allergen are pasted like a band-aid on top of the skin, generally on the back. And later on, a classical response is looked for, which includes immediate wheal and flare reaction. Then one more thing that can be done is immunoglobulin E levels, which is supposed to be elevated in atopic asthma. In RAST or radiosorbent assay, what is done is basically patient serum is tested for specific immunoglobulins. So immunoglobulin may be specific to a particular pollen or say fungus. However, in RAST, when you do, you have a specific IgE in mind and you test the patient's serum for that particular IgE. So this next type of asthma we'll be talking about is non-atopic asthma. So here obviously there is no type 1 hypersensitivity involved. So there is no evidence of allergen sensitization. No skin test will be negative, as well as family history is less common. And the common triggers for non-atopic asthma include viruses like rhinovirus, parainfluenza virus, RSV, then some other triggers like smoking, sulfur dioxide, then exposure to cold air, exercise, etc. The third type is drug-induced asthma. So some of the common drugs are NSAIDs, non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, like aspirin. So they cause asthma by inhibiting cyclooxygenase. So the fourth type of asthma is occupational asthma. So this type of asthma is triggered by fumes like epoxy resins, plastics. So some of those fancy furniture videos that you see in Facebook, so those are epoxy resins. Then next is organic and chemical dust like wood dust, cotton dust, etc. Then there are gases like toluene. Then there are some other chemicals like formaldehyde. So formaldehyde is commonly used in pathology museum. So that may trigger asthma in some of the patients. The mechanism of this occupational asthma basically is a combination of type 1 hypersensitivity reaction as well as direct liberation of bronchoconstrictor substances as well as some unknown hypersensitivity reactions. Going on to the pathogenesis of bronchial asthma. So it's a very complex pathogenesis. I have attempted to simplify it. So the important part of the pathogenesis is Th2 response, IgE and inflammation. So this is very important for the atopic type of asthma that we saw. Apart from this, genetic susceptibility, some genes and some environmental factors also play a role in the pathogenesis of bronchial asthma. So first coming to the Th2 response, IgE as well as inflammation. So in the first step, that is sensitization phase, what happens is in this diagram you see RE, that is the red line. So that is basically respiratory epithelium. So allergen enters from the airway and portion of it goes and sits on the T helper cell 2 ka receptor. So once that portion of allergen goes and sits on T helper cell 2 ka receptor, T helper cell 2 will mainly secrete interleukin 4. So what that interleukin 4 does is it goes and stimulates B cells to differentiate into plasma cells and start producing immunoglobulin E. So these immunoglobulin E will then go and sit on top of the mast cell receptor. The Fc portion will get attached to the mast cell receptor. Then T helper cell 2, it also secretes interleukin 5. So this interleukin 5, it recruits the local eosinophils. And then Th helper cell 2 also secretes interleukin 13. This interleukin 13 will cause the respiratory wall, airway wall, to secrete excessive mucus into the lumen. Apart from the mucus, eosinophil, which is stimulated by interleukin 5, will also secrete some mediators which will cause some symptoms of bronchial asthma. So this is the phase 1 wherein there is sensitization to a particular allergen. In the phase 2, that is exposure to same allergen subsequently. In this phase, what happens is, second time when the same allergen comes, it will directly attach onto the immunoglobulin E, which was already present, which was already added on top of the mast cell. So when this happens, there is degranulation of mast cell. So degranulation of mast cell will release so many chemical mediators which cause various effects leading to symptoms of bronchial asthma. So let us see what those mediators are. So first is leukotriene C4, D4 and E4. So these leukotrienes, what they do is they cause bronchoconstriction, increase vascular permeability and produce excessive mucus. So whenever there is excessive vascular permeability, mucus secretion will increase. Second is prostaglandin D2. This causes bronchoconstriction. Next is acetylcholine and histamine and also serotonin. So what these things do is cause bronchoconstriction. So once there is bronchoconstriction as well as mucus hypersecretion, you will get various clinical features of bronchial asthma. So in this second phase, there are two types of reactions that you see. First is the early phase reaction and second is the late phase reaction. This is a slide which shows the summary of all the mediators that are being produced in the second phase in asthma. So first is leukotriene, C4, D4 and E4, which cause primarily bronchoconstriction as well as increased vascular permeability and excessive mucus production. Second is prostaglandin D2, which also does the same thing, bronchoconstriction and vasodilation. Then thirdly, acetylcholine, histamine and serotonin. So all these three things cause bronchoconstriction. Coming to the early phase and late phase reaction. In early phase, what happens is there is bronchoconstriction, there is increased mucus production, variable degrees of vasodilation as well as increased vascular permeability. In the late phase, there is recruitment of leukocytes. So more and more inflammatory cells are coming there. So the same B cells, eosinophils and Th2 cells. So if more of those cells come into, including mast cells, so more of those cells, if they come into play, then there will be even more exacerbation of the symptoms of asthma. Apart from this, in the late phase, one more thing that happens is there is destruction of the respiratory epithelium. So in the previous two, in early phase as well as the first stage of sensitization, there you saw that the respiratory epithelium was intact. So here in the late phase, respiratory epithelium is also being destroyed. So the second type of pathogenesis is genetic susceptibility. So bronchial asthma is a disease that is caused by mutations or alterations in multiple genes. So some of those genes are interleukin 13 gene, ADAM33 gene, as well as class 2 HLA molecules. The third important step in the pathogenesis is environmental factors. So there is something known as hygiene hypothesis. So this hygiene hypothesis you can write in autoimmune diseases, many autoimmune diseases. So hygiene hypothesis basically states that too much cleanliness leads to autoimmune disorders. One of the other common examples for this hygiene hypothesis is multiple sclerosis. So multiple sclerosis in Indian population is seen more in Parsis. So it is said that Parsis are very clean. So it was coordinated like that. So since they are very clean, that is why they get multiple sclerosis. So exposure to antigens is a very important step in prevention of autoimmune disorders. To summarize this pathogenesis for you, firstly, we said that there were three important pathways in pathogenesis. The first pathway was Th2 response, IgE and inflammation. In the first step, you saw that there were two things. So initially sensitization was there and later on exposure to the same allergen. So in the second stage of this Th2 responses, that is subsequent exposure, there were early reaction as well as late reaction. So the second important type in pathogenesis was genetic susceptibility. So in genetic susceptibility, we saw that many genes were responsible to bring about bronchial asthma. And the third one is environmental factors. In environmental factors, the hypothesis is hygiene hypothesis. Coming to the morphology of bronchial asthma, so the first important point in morphology is the production of mucus plug. So in pathogenesis, you saw that too much of mucus was being released into the airway, right? So that mucus will organize itself in such a way that it will occupy entire airways. So that is how big the mucus plug will be. It is very thick and tenacious or tough. Second is Kirschmann spiral. So Kirschmann spiral is basically a microscopic finding. Mucus plugs were actually gross finding. Kirschmann spiral is a microscopic findings. Again, these are tiny mucus plugs. Third is the presence of eosinophils, again under microscopy. And the last one is Charcot-Leyden crystals. So Charcot-Leyden crystals are basically products that are released from eosinophils, which appear like a needle-shaped crystal. Here's an image of this thick, tenacious mucus plug that I told you about. Why is it appearing so branched? Because that is the shape of the airway. That is why it looks so branched. So next is what we spoke about was Kirschmann spiral. So this is the orange color thing that you see here, right? So that is Kirschmann spiral. So this is basically a microscopic version of the mucus plug. So as and when it is released from the cell, it is produced by. This is the third image in which there are numerous cells, and most of those cells, if you look carefully, they have a bilobed nucleus with orangish cytoplasm. So clearly all these cells are eosinophils, and in the center of the slide you are able to see some crystals, some pink colored crystals. These are needle shaped. Sometimes some complex polygonal shape can also be there. Since asthma is usually a chronic disease, you may be able to see airway remodeling, that is some structural changes in the airway due to asthma itself. So what are the components of those airway remodeling? So the first is thickening of airway wall. Second is sub-basement membrane fibrosis. I'll show you in the image all these things. Third one is increased vascularity. Fourth one, increase in the size of glands. Since excessive, they are stimulated to produce excessive secretions, ultimately they increase in size. Then lastly, hypertrophy or hyperplasia of the smooth muscle in the wall. The topmost portion in this image, what you are seeing, pink with some orangish material. So that is the luminal surface of the biopsy here. Below that, what you are seeing is the epithelium, respiratory epithelium. In the respiratory epithelium, if you observe carefully, multiple round lighter images are there, right? So those are all the goblet cells. So goblet cell hyperplasia. So that is the goblet cell hyperplasia that you are seeing. Also, if you notice the green arrowhead, so that is also pointing to goblet cell hyperplasia. Just below this bluish epithelium, you can see a clear band, pink colored. So here it is marked by the black arrowhead. So that entire band below the epithelium is the scarring or collagen tissue that has deposited. Third one, the yellow arrowhead that you are seeing here points to all inflammatory cells. So which are the main inflammatory cells here? Characteristically eosinophils. So if you observe that carefully, multiple orange color cells are there with orange color cytoplasm. So those are all eosinophils. And lastly, what you see, which is something like a teal arrowhead. So that is the smooth muscle that has undergone hypertrophy. So till now we discussed two topics. First was atelectasis, second was bronchial asthma. Now the third topic for this video, that is lung abscess. So lung abscess, any abscess is defined as a collection of pus, right? So likewise, the same here. Only difference is the organ here is lung. So the term pulmonary abscess describes a local suppurative process that produces necrosis of the lung tissue. And common organisms which cause lung abscess include Staphylococcus aureus, Streptococcus, and some gram-negative bacteria. Etiopathogenesis wise, what we learn is how the bacteria get introduced to the lungs to further cause lung abscess. So the first modality of introduction is aspiration of infective material. So this happens in patients in whom cough is suppressed. So common sources for infections in aspiration is dental caries or poor dental hygiene. That is one thing. Secondly, in coma patients who do not have any reflexes. Then in alcoholics. So these are some of the examples. So second modality is antecedent primary lung infection. For example, in patients who were suffering from pneumonia, later on they may go on to develop lung abscess. Third modality is septic embolism. Septic emboli are transmission of infections from conditions such as infective endocarditis. Then fourthly, there is neoplasia. So if at all there is a tumor of the airway which is obstructing one part of the airway, distal to that obstruction, that is post obstruction, there will be a collection of secretion similar to what we saw in bronchiectasis. And then in the collection of secretion there may be bacterial proliferation which may go on to give lung abscess. Lastly, some miscellaneous causes. For example, road traffic accident. So if at all there is an injury in which there is a penetrating trauma to the chest, then obviously some bacteria from outside will be introduced into the lung. So in which cases there will be again lung abscess formation. Clinical features wise, the patient will have cough, fever, copious amounts of foul smelling sputum, then chest pain, clubbing, weight loss, etc. can be seen, and diagnosis is by chest x-ray PA view. In that you will be able to make out the area of the lung abscess. Coming to the morphology, so abscesses are basically large cavities filled with pus. So any part of lung may be involved, depends on the etiopathogenesis. If the lung abscess was caused by aspiration, then it is usually in the right lung and it is single in focus. If lung abscess is occurring in post pneumonia or in bronchiectasis, then multiple areas will have lung abscess, as well as the site will be basal and diffusely scattered. Lastly, if it is septic emboli from conditions such as infective endocarditis, then here also it will be multiple, but it may affect any region of the lung. So gross image of lung abscess here, you are able to see discrete two cavities filled with pus.